Somewhere inside you, right now, two people are at war. One of them is generous, tender, capable of a love that would astonish you. The other is petty, cruel, quietly drawn to the very things that would wreck your life. And on your worst nights, you are not entirely sure which one is really you. We like to believe that good people and bad people are different species, that there is a clean line down the middle of humanity, and we are safely on the right side of it. But every so often, you catch yourself wanting something ugly, savoring a stranger's downfall, lying smoothly to your own face, and the line blurs. About 150 years ago, a Russian ex-convict who had once stood in front of a firing squad and been reprieved at the very last second sat down to write the biggest question a human being can ask. And he buried it inside a story about a father and his sons, a murder, and a family tearing itself to pieces. He wanted to know whether, if there is no God and no final judgment waiting, anything you do actually matters, or whether everything, absolutely everything, is permitted. He put a saint, a sensualist, and an atheist genius into one household, gave them the same wild blood, and let them collide. This is the Brothers Karamazov, Fyodor Dostoevsky's final and greatest novel, and it is not really about 19th century Russia at all. It is about the argument raging inside your own chest between faith and despair, love and appetite, the person you perform and the person you actually are. It asks the question you have been avoiding. When no one is watching and nothing is forbidden, what stops you? In about 20 minutes, let's find out what Dostoevsky answered. The book is The Brothers Karamazov, published in 1880 by Fyodor Dostoevsky and finished barely 3 months before he died. To understand it, you have to understand what its author had already survived. As a young man, Dostoevsky was arrested for belonging to a circle of political radicals, sentenced to death, and marched out into a snowy square to be shot, only to be told, as he stood waiting for the bullets, that the Tsar had commuted the sentence at the last possible moment. It was staged cruelty, a mock execution designed to break the prisoners. He was sent instead to 4 years of hard labor in a Siberian prison camp, chained among murderers and thieves. The man who came back from that had lost his easy faith in progress and in tidy human goodness, and found something harder underneath it. A wrestling, tormented, deeply Christian conviction that the human soul is a battlefield, and that grace is real but never cheap. He knew addiction. He was a compulsive gambler. He knew grief. He had buried a beloved little son named Alyosha not long before he began writing, and he gave that name to the hero of this book. So when Dostoevsky writes about faith and doubt, he is not theorizing from a comfortable armchair. He is writing with everything he has bled for laid out on the table. The novel survives because it refuses to make the argument easy. Dostoevsky gives the case against God, against any world where innocent children suffer, some of the most devastating pages ever written, and he does not cheat to defeat them. He earns his hope by first staring, without blinking, straight into the abyss. Here is the whole novel in one sentence. 3 brothers who share one monstrous, sensual father are dragged toward the murder of that father, and through the crime and its fallout, Dostoevsky stages the ultimate trial. Whether a human being, with no heaven and no hell to enforce it, can find any reason at all to be good. And he answers that the only reason strong enough is love, active and unglamorous and hard. The father is Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov, a greedy, drunken buffoon who neglected every one of his children. The eldest son, Dmitri, is passion on two legs, a soldier ruled by appetite and wounded honor, at war with his father over both money and a woman. The second, Ivan, is a brilliant cold atheist whose logic will slowly poison the whole house. The youngest, Alyosha, is a gentle young novice in the monastery, the still center of the storm. And there is a fourth, a half-brother, the servant Smerdyakov, watching all of them from the shadows. When the father is found murdered, the question the book has been building toward finally detonates. Who is really guilty? We will walk it in 5 beats. First, the Karamazov force, the wild appetite for life that runs in all their blood. Second, the lie you tell yourself, and why the father can never stop performing. Third, Ivan's rebellion, and the terrifying idea that without God, everything is permitted. Fourth, the dying elder's answer, that each of us is somehow responsible for everyone. And fifth, active love, the harsh and dreadful cure Dostoevsky offers in place of easy comfort. 5 beats, 1 murdered father, and the deepest question a person can ask. First beat, the Karamazov force. What binds these mismatched brothers is not affection, but blood. A specific, dangerous kind of vitality Dostoevsky calls the Karamazov nature. A violent, greedy thirst for life itself, for all its pleasures and its extremes that can drive a man into the gutter or toward God with exactly the same force. Dmitri, the eldest, understands it best because it is tearing him in half. In a feverish confession to his younger brother, he tries to explain how a single soul can adore purity and plunge into filth at the very same time, how a man can worship the ideal of the Madonna and still burn for the ideal of Sodom. And then he says the line that holds the whole novel together. The awful thing is that beauty is mysterious as well as terrible. God and the devil are fighting there, and the battlefield is the heart of man. Sit with that. Dmitri is not describing 2 kinds of people, the good and the wicked, sorted into camps. He is describing the war inside one person, inside every person. The same heart that longs for goodness is helplessly drawn toward ruin, and neither side ever fully wins. You know this if you have ever admired someone and envied them in the same breath, or loved a person you were also quietly destroying, or felt disgust and desire braided together so tightly you could not pull them apart. Dostoevsky's first insight is that you are not a simple creature who occasionally slips. You are a battlefield, and pretending the war isn't happening is how you lose it. Second beat, the lie you tell yourself. The father, Fyodor Pavlovich, is the Karamazov force with absolutely nothing to restrain it. A clownish, shameless old sensualist who has turned his own degradation into a performance. He plays the buffoon on purpose, insulting people, making scenes, debasing himself, because if he humiliates himself first, no one else can do it to him. Early in the book, the whole family gathers at the monastery, and the dying elder, Father Zosima, watches this grown man clown and lie and grovel for attention, and cuts straight to the root of it. Above all, don't lie to yourself. The man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to such a pass that he cannot distinguish the truth within him or around him, and so loses all respect for himself and for others. That is the diagnosis of the entire tragedy to come. Fyodor lies to himself so constantly that he has lost the ability to feel his own worth or anyone else's. and a man who respects nothing will eventually trample everything. The modern echo needs no translation. Think of the person who performs their own cynicism online, who takes offense on purpose because the outrage feels good, who curates a self so polished they have forgotten what is actually underneath it. Every small lie you tell to protect your image quietly costs you a little more contact with what is real, until you can no longer tell your own truth from your own spin. Dostoevsky's warning, spoken through Zosima, is brutal and simple. The first person you deceive is always yourself, and everything downstream of that rots. Third beat, Ivan's rebellion. The second brother, Ivan, has the coldest and most brilliant mind in the book, and he carries an idea like a loaded gun. He cannot accept a God who allows innocent children to be tortured, and in a shattering conversation with Alyosha, he lays out atrocity after atrocity done to the powerless, then declares that no future harmony, no heaven, could ever be worth the tears of one suffering child. And so, he says, he respectfully returns his ticket to paradise. But his rebellion does not stop at grief. It hardens into a proposition that runs through the whole novel like poison. If there's no immortality of the soul, then there's no virtue, and everything is lawful. Follow the logic, because it is genuinely seductive. If there is no God, no soul, no final reckoning, then good and evil are only words, preferences, social habits, and a strong, clear-eyed man is free to do anything at all that he can get away with. Ivan himself never acts on it, but the servant Smerdyakov is always listening, and he takes the master's clever theory and makes it flesh. He murders the father, then calmly tells Ivan that he only did what Ivan's own philosophy had permitted. That is Dostoevsky's most terrifying point about ideas. Ivan thought he was merely being honest, merely following reason wherever it led. But ideas do not stay politely in the study. They walk downstairs and pick up a knife. We live surrounded by this now. The comfortable argument that nothing really matters, that morality is a fiction for the naive, that the smart move is simply whatever you can rationalize. Dostoevsky saw exactly where that road ends, and he made you watch someone drive all the way down it. Fourth beat, the elder's answer. Against Ivan's icy logic, Dostoevsky sets the dying monk, Father Zosima, and the answer Zosima leaves behind is every bit as radical, in the opposite direction, as Ivan's. Where Ivan says that without God, everything is permitted and no one is truly guilty, Zosima says the exact reverse, that everyone is guilty of everything, together. He teaches to the monks around his deathbed that every one of us is undoubtedly responsible for all men and everything on earth. Read that slowly, because it sounds absurd until it suddenly clicks. Zosima is not saying you personally committed every crime. He is saying that we are so deeply woven into one another that your coldness, your small daily cruelties, the love you withheld when you could have given it, all ripple outward and help shape the very world that produced the murderer, the thief, the despairing. Stop asking whose fault it is, he says, and start living as though it were partly yours. Because the moment you take responsibility, instead of assigning blame, you stop being a spectator to the world's suffering and become someone who can actually heal a corner of it. This is the precise opposite of the reflex of our age, which is to hunt down the guilty party, point and feel clean. Dostoevsky, through Zosima, hands you a harder and stranger kind of freedom. You cannot fix everything, but you are answerable for your own piece of everything. And that answerability is not a crushing burden. It is the beginning of love. Guilt, spread wide enough, stops being punishment and turns into connection. Fifth beat, active love. So what does Dostoevsky actually prescribe? Not a proof of God, not a clever argument that beats Ivan on points. He knows perfectly well that arguments have never saved anyone. He prescribes love, but he is careful to tell you exactly what kind, because the easy kind is a lie. Earlier in the book, a wealthy, restless woman comes to Zosima and confesses that she dreams of loving all humanity, of giving up everything to nurse the sick. But she admits that in reality, people irritate her, and her lovely enthusiasm evaporates the moment love asks anything real of her. Zosima's reply is one of the most bracing things in the whole novel. Love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared with love in dreams. Love in dreams is easy. It is the warm glow of imagining yourself noble, the applause of one grand gesture quickly over. Love in action is changing the same bandage again, forgiving the same person again, showing up for the tedious, unglamorous, thankless work of caring for a real human being who is not grateful and does not improve on your schedule. This is Dostoevsky's entire answer to the abyss. You will not think your way out of despair. You have to act your way out, one concrete, difficult, loving deed at a time. Alyosha lives exactly this, not by winning debates, but simply by being present, sitting with the grieving, loving people who have not earned it yet. Against Ivan's dazzling nihilism, Dostoevsky sets something almost embarrassingly plain. Get up and do the next hard, kind thing. So what does it all add up to? On the surface, the Brothers Karamazov is a murder mystery. A hateful father, 3 sons with motives, a killing in the night, a trial that convicts the wrong man. But underneath the plot, Dostoevsky is running one enormous experiment on the human soul, and every beat is part of it. He begins with the Karamazov force, the wild appetite that turns the heart into a battlefield where God and the devil fight. He shows, in the father, how lying to yourself rots that battlefield from the inside until you respect nothing and no one. He gives Ivan the full case for the abyss, that without God everything is lawful, and then lets that idea walk downstairs and commit a murder, proving that ideas have blood on them. And then he answers, not with logic, but with a whole way of living, that each of us is responsible for all, and that the only force strong enough to save us is love in action, harsh and dreadful and real. The murder is never really the point. The point is the question every character is secretly on trial for. How then shall I live? And Dostoevsky's reply is stitched into the old elder's dying counsel. Love all God's creation, the whole and every grain of sand in it. Love every leaf, every ray of God's light. Not because it is easy, because it is the one answer that does not collapse when everything else does. The brothers all inherit the same violent capacity for life. What differs is only what each of them chooses to do with it, and that difference turns out to be everything. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your week. Dostoevsky's whole answer to despair is not a feeling, it is a practice, and you can begin it today. Pick one person who is genuinely difficult to love, not the abstract humanity you feel warm about from a safe distance, but the actual irritating, ungrateful, disappointing human being right in front of you, and do one small, concrete, loving thing for them without waiting to feel inspired first. That is the harsh and dreadful love and it is also the only kind that ever changes anything. And then take Zosima's other instruction, the one aimed straight at the inside of your own head. Above all, don't lie to yourself. This week, catch the exact moment you start spinning, rehearsing why you were right, why it wasn't your fault, why the ugly thing you secretly want is actually fine. Just notice it. Because every lie you tell yourself, Dostoevsky warns, blinds you a little more to what is true in you and around you, and a person who can no longer see the truth cannot love and cannot be reached. You do not have to solve the problem of evil or settle once and for all whether there is a God. You only have to do the next honest, loving, unglamorous thing, and then the one after that. Ivan tried to think his way to an answer and went mad. Alyosha simply loved the people in front of him and became the one person in the whole book who is genuinely free. Dostoevsky is betting his entire final novel that Alyosha was right. Fyodor Dostoevsky poured everything he had survived: the firing squad, the prison camp, the buried child, the lifelong wrestling with faith, into this one enormous final book, and left it as a question disguised as a family tragedy. With no one forcing your hand, what actually makes you good? His answer was never an argument, but a way to live. Don't lie to yourself. Take responsibility for your own corner of the world, and love in action even when it is harsh and dreadful and nobody claps. If this walk through the Brothers Karamazov gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time, we leave the snowbound monasteries of Russia for the sunlit clarity of ancient Athens and Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, the oldest and most practical answer ever written to the very question these brothers are torn apart by. What truly makes a good life, and how do you build the kind of character that chooses well even when no one is watching? And tell me in the comments, which brother is loudest inside you? Passionate Dmitri, doubting Ivan, or loving Alyosha? And which one do you wish were louder? I read every reply.